Lock your doors, pull your chair a little closer to the screen, and imagine we're sitting around a campfire in the dead of night. Because today, we're diving into an explainer of a deleted internet mystery that is, quite frankly, pure nightmare fuel. This is the legend of the Harrow House inheritance. So put yourself in Claire's shoes for a second. You're a newlywed. It's literally just 3 days after your wedding to a man named Daniel. You're in that beautiful, perfect honeymoon phase. And then it just violently shatters. I mean, uncovering a small secret about your partner is one thing, but realizing you've married into a sprawling, generational horror, you just don't expect a man to lie about an entire graveyard in his backyard. What we are tracing in this explainer is the escalating horror of an account that vanished from the internet in less than 24 hours. What was left behind was this frantic, terrifying story of a woman completely trapped by her husband's inheritance. And it's not just a spooky story, it is a literal countdown, a ticking clock left by someone who realized, way too late, that her own death date was scheduled for tomorrow. Now, ordinary marital lies are, hidden debt, maybe some past relationships, a secret drinking habit. But Harrow lies? That is a visceral, deep-in-your-gut dread. Imagine Claire's perspective, watching from her bedroom window as her brand-new husband walks into the dark, heavy woods at the edge of their property. He's entirely barefoot, and he's carrying a shovel. That is an impossible, terrifying leap from everyday normalcy. To really understand why Daniel was walking into those woods, we have to talk about the property itself. Because the locals, they didn't just call it a house. It was a hungry, generational curse. The Harrow house was practically a living, breathing entity. It didn't just sit out there where the trees grew too close together. It had appetites. It wanted brides. It wanted children. And the Harrow men, well, they were obligated to feed it. Picture that first horrifying night. There's this complete, heavy silence as Daniel walks across the yard in just a white t-shirt and bare feet. Then the sudden, ominous click and death of the security motion light as it just flickers out. And honestly, the worst part? The terrifying normalcy of him just smiling and making eggs the very next morning, acting like he hadn't just vanished into the pitch-black darkness with a shovel. Well, on the second night, Claire couldn't take the suspense anymore. She crept out past the tree line and discovered a cemetery hidden in the woods containing exactly 6 graves. And there was Daniel, kneeling right next to the newest one, just staring at this chilling inscription. Elise Harrow, beloved wife, taken too soon. This is exactly where the story plunges into absolute, suffocating terror. Think about the absolute panic of watching your husband perform this morbid, squelching ritual in the wet dirt. He digs down, he pries open the coffin, and inside, it isn't a skeleton, it's a bloated, wet woman. He gently places his wedding ring right next to hers in the swollen flesh. And then, he looks up, piercing through the darkness right at Claire, and calmly says, "Claire, you were supposed to stay in bed." The very next morning, Claire makes a frantic, desperate trip to the town librarian, which only confirmed her absolute worst fears. The librarian literally went pale the second she heard the name Harrow, and whispered this chilling local secret. The Harrow men always marry, but nobody ever sees their wives grow old. That was it. That was the breaking point. Claire ran straight home to pack her bags. But when she threw open her suitcase, a sickening sight was waiting for her right on top of her clothes. A lock of wet, black hair, tied perfectly with her own wedding bouquet ribbon. She turns around and Daniel is standing right behind her. He's not angry. He's just disappointed. He casually confesses that Elise was his first wife, sure, but not his only wife. Looking her dead in the eye, he says, "I loved all of you." And right on cue, the dead arrived. The horror completely ramps up as these undead figures gather in the room. 5, maybe 6 rotting women in ruined, muddy dresses, broken bones, missing eyes. One of them is literally carrying her own jaw in her hands. But you know what the most terrifying detail is? They aren't looking at Claire's face. They're all staring dead at her stomach. Claire was pregnant. She hadn't even told Daniel yet. But Daniel just smiled with this sick relief and said, "Now they'll keep you." He locks her upstairs. I want you to imagine being trapped in that dark room, listening to the dead brides dragging themselves through the halls outside your door every single night. One of them is just sobbing inside the walls until sunrise, while another presses her face against the wood and whispers this horrifying promise. He promised we could wear you. Try to imagine the sheer, suffocating paranoia of her situation. It is one thing to hear ghosts out in the hallway. It is an entirely different sanity-breaking level of terror to wake up and see wet, squelching, muddy footprints of children standing right beside your bed where you slept. The house wanted brides, and it wanted children. When Claire screamed at Daniel asking why he didn't just leave, he looked genuinely terrified and whispered, "Because it follows." Knowing she had to break this curse or die trying, Claire makes a breathless, frantic break for it. She stabs Daniel in the throat with a piece of broken glass and bolts out the front door. But the brides are already out there. The very earth of the cemetery begins to heave, and hundreds of tiny, unseen hands burst from the soil, grabbing her ankles, dragging her down beneath the suffocating earth, until she wakes up in pitch blackness, inside a coffin where a dead woman whispers, "You're early." Right before the earth swallowed her completely, she had looked back at the porch. She saw Daniel. His throat was hanging open from the glass, but pale, dead fingers and thick roots were actively moving inside the wound, physically rebuilding his fatal injury. He just smiled at her as she sank. The house keeps what it's fed. Now, here is where the story brilliantly shifts from supernatural terror into this maddening psychological dread. Claire somehow claws her way out of that coffin, but when the police finally go to investigate, they find absolutely nothing. The house is completely empty, Daniel is missing, and most terrifyingly, there are exactly 6 graves in that cemetery. No extra coffin, no dead brides, no buried children. The sheriff fully believed Claire was having a severe hallucinatory breakdown, and Claire herself started to doubt her own mind. That is, until the sheriff noticed a chilling, impossible detail about the graveyard that changed literally everything. If you look at the dates, every single one of those 6 graves carried the exact same date. Not the date the women died, but the exact date they had married Daniel. And then there was the gaping, hungry 7th grave. It was completely empty, but it already had a pristine headstone. Clara's name was on it. And the death date carved into the stone was for exactly 3 days in the future, tomorrow. Which brings us to the agonizing present moment of the author's deleted post. Claire is hiding out in a cheap, rundown motel room miles outside of town. She is officially out of time. And every single night, she lays awake, completely frozen in bed, listening to the hollow, terrifying sound of knock, knock, knock on her door, always at exactly 3:13 a.m. Remember what Daniel said, the house follows. And the physical manifestation of that curse is literally bleeding into her safe space. When she woke up this morning, she found wet graveyard dirt packed inside her shoes. The house is proving to her that she is already considered buried, because her carved death date is tomorrow. The author completely deleted her account shortly after posting this update, leaving us with just one final desperate warning. If you ever find yourself driving down Harrow Road at the very edge of town, count the graves carefully in the heavy darkness, because while there are usually 6 graves, sometimes there is a gaping, hungry 7th. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to look around your room right now. Seriously, look over your shoulder. Check the corners. Make absolutely sure nobody is standing silently beside your bed. Because some graves aren't waiting for the dead. They are actively waiting for the living. And whatever you do, if you hear the rhythmic, squelching sound of digging outside your window tonight, do not check.